Good morning. This is just an audio test, if someone can hear me.
Yes, I can see and hear you.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes, I can see and hear you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Kevin Lucas from SIA. Just want to make sure you guys are able to see and or hear me.
Can't see you. Oh, wait, now I can. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Gilman, you out there? There you are. Morning. Today is Tuesday, January 14th. It's 9 a.m. and we're back on the record in 24AL-0377E Public Service Company time of use rates. Any preliminary matters before we jump to Mr. Lehrman? Mr. Mansholt.
Yes, I have some cross-examination reservations that I can change and update based
Yep.
upon the results of yesterday's hearing. I previously informed that we're waiving cross of EOC's Mr. Bennett, but in addition, we are now also going to be waiving cross WRA's Miss Claire Valentine, as well as COSA-CIA's Mr. Kevin Lucas.
Commissioner Gilman, do you have questions for Mr. Lucas?
I do not.
Commissioner Plant, do you have questions for Mr. Lucas?
No, I do not.
I had one, but I think I'll let it go. So I think Mr. Lucas, Mr. Schlesinger, Mr. Lucas can be excused. Mr. Schlesinger, anything to add?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. We did have one update to Mr. Lucas's testimony based on an error that was discovered that we were going to introduce when he took the stand. But I believe Public Services are, I've already shared the exhibit with Public Service, and Mr. Mansholt informed me he didn't have any objections to it. So I suppose we could probably just stipulate it in.
Yeah, would you just mention the hearing exhibit, very briefly describe it?
Yeah, so it is in our box.com as hearing exhibit 806, if you want to pull it up.
Yeah, if we could pull that up.
And well, actually, before we do that, let's just take a look at hearing exhibit 801 on page 31 so that you can see what we're replacing.
Give me just a second. You said 801?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Kunkel.
Is it Miss Federico this morning?
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
yes, it is.
Thank you, Ms. Federico.
You guys do sound alike, so Mr. Schlesinger.
Thank you, faceless overlord helper.
Yeah, thanks to both of you guys. Have been doing a great job, so appreciate you both.
Thank you. And if we could go to page 31. There, right above that table 3, if we could scroll down just a little bit, Mr. Lucas stated at line 12 that he was assuming that the company's TOU work papers failed to adjust for daylight savings time and thus applied an adjustment, but noted that if the billing determinants were in fact in MPT, the rates he would recommend would need to be updated, but the impact would be minor. After reviewing this, the company informed us that the adjustment that Mr. Lucas applied here was not necessary because the company did account for the daylight savings time shift in its work papers. And so Mr. Lucas has updated this table 3. And so that is what we have marked as hearing exhibit 806, which is in our box.com.
Can you pull up 806 and go to the same page? Ms. Federico.
I think it's just the one page.
That's right.
Oh.
806 is just a new table, and I'm realizing it should say table 3. It says table 1 there, but it is a new table 3 from that same page. The difference is quite minor, as Mr. Lucas forecasted previously, and as I said, Public Services already had an opportunity to look at this.
If you would move it into the record.
Yeah, I'd like to move for the admission of hearing exhibit 806.
Any objections? Hearing none, so moved. And Mr. Lucas is excused.
Thank you.
Any other preliminary matters? Ms.
Good.
Stockmeyer.
I couldn't find the hand thing on Zoom. It's been too long.
This works.
Good morning.
We're going old school.
EOC, after reviewing its notes from yesterday, is also going to waive cross of Miss Valentine, the WRA's witness.
Okay. Commissioner Gilman, any questions for Ms. Valentine?
I do not.
Commissioner Plant?
Nope.
Nor do I, Mr. Barrasso. I think we can excuse Ms. Valentine unless there's any record updates we need to do.
No record updates. Thank you, commissioners.
Ms. Valentine is excused. Any other preliminary matters? Mr. Lehrman, you out there? Can you hold up your right hand? You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Put your hand down. Is anybody with you or communicating with you in any way?
No,
If that changes, you'll let us know.
I will.
Back to you, Ms. Van Giem.
Can you state your name and spell it for the record?
Yes, my name is Matthew Lehrman. It's Matthew, last name Lehrman, Lehrman.
By whom are you employed in what capacity?
I am the Senior Policy Advisor for Energy Systems for the City of Boulder.
And did you cause to be filed hearing Exhibit 700, Attachment 1, revised for your answer testimony, Exhibit 700 revised answer testimony, Attachments 1 through 3, as well as hearing Exhibit 701 cross-answer testimony of Matthew Lehrman?
Yes, I did.
If I asked you these questions today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Witness Lehrman is ready for cross-examination.
Commissioner questioning. I think there's no cross, and I think Commissioner Plant, you had some questions for Mr. Lehrman. You're up, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Lehrman.
Good morning.
I apologize for being the one who kept you on the witness list, but your testimony, I thought, really got at some of the questions and concerns I have around the way we're approaching and thinking about the TOU, and I just wanted to get your perspectives on a couple of things. First of all, you say in your answer testimony that a TOU can only be effective in reducing peak demand if the customers are willing to remain on the rate and actually be able to shift usage. You quoted Mr. Murphy of Excel saying many customers report feeling anxious and stressed about managing their electricity use, especially during peak time, which often coincides with times when electricity is most needed for daily activities like cooking, cleaning, and family time. And here we're looking at a TOU that may go from 5 to 9, 6 to 10, 5 to 10, some sort of combination of those, and basically, constitute for many families the entire time that the families are home together in the evening. So in the course of the hearing, I've floated a couple of ways of trying to get at this problem. One is, the idea of a baseline TOU that would allow a certain amount of consumption during peak times. It would be exempt from the peak rate to acknowledge that there is a base level of energy usage that's not shiftable, and allows families to just enjoy their time together without thinking about, expensive energy. The second would be limiting our on-peak period to maybe the highest 2 hours, which would allow a little more flexibility for families, not take the entire time that they're home together for the highest cost electricity. So I just wanted to get your thoughts around these two approaches or any other that you may want to throw out there, and how you feel they would integrate with sort of real life implementation of TOUs, trying to meet families halfway between the needs of the family and the needs of the utility. So I'll just open it up there and try and get your thoughts on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think both of the proposals are very interesting. If I understand the first one correctly, there would be, say, 300 or 400 kilowatt hours a month or something like that. That would be something like a flat rate, and then TOU after that. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's interesting, and I think Boulder has weighed in previously when inverted block rates were previously discussed. And I think one of the challenges was that it was really hard to know when you crossed over from the low threshold to the higher threshold. But I'm not sure that's the case anymore because of AMI. I think that was kind of a problem before AMI, but now there's many different ways I think you could notify customers and say you're approaching, your threshold. So I think that because of that tool that's available now through AMI, I think is really valuable, and I think that makes that first proposal, really interesting to consider. I think it's still important to think about what the actual time of use periods are and the price ratio and making sure you can actually deliver that information to customers. But if you can do those, if you can dial that in right, I think that first proposal is a really interesting idea. As for your second proposal, again, I think would be more consistent with what Boulder said in answer testimony and in cross in terms of really trying to zero in on exactly the hours that are causing the highest costs. When I was listening to the discussion yesterday, one of the things that I thought about was really wondering if those high costs are actually in effect every day, or if there's really only certain days that the truly high costs, the system causing costs are really in place. And if it's the case that it's only, say, 100 hours a year, is there a way that we could design a rate that maybe just a day ahead, we would notify customers and say, hey, tomorrow from 6 to 8 p.m., it's going to be a high cost. So that's actually the on-peak day. But for the remainder of the days of the week, assuming the costs aren't high, that 6 to 8 p.m. period would just be the flat cost or the off-peak cost or something like that. And again, we have a lot of tools to communicate with customers to do that. And I think there's probably a little bit of work to be done to actually zero in on when those costs are, how to notify customers. But I think that's very much on the table. And so in that way, even if there was, say, a 6 to 8 p.m. on peak period, it wouldn't be in effect every day. It would just be, hey, tomorrow it's going to be a high price. To the extent you can reduce your consumption or shift some consumption, that would be great.
So that would be sort of somewhere between a real-time peak pricing and on peak. It would be sort of a set on peak that sometimes was in effect.
Exactly. And I think there's been some examples of that elsewhere in the country. And I think there's also examples of, particularly during very high stress periods of time when utilities simply just ask customers to conserve, there's been shown to be benefits of that. And so I don't know that it's fully something that has been, investigated in Colorado, but I think it's a potentially really compelling idea.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. What do the same concerns? I think that the family situation is a little bit more relatable to everybody, but do the same concerns exist for the commercial customers, or is that less of, can we sort of think about tying the commercial rate more to the curve without thinking about, general impacts?
It's an interesting question. I think I can't certainly speak for all commercial customers. The city does have a variety of different types of facilities, some that are probably fairly capable of responding to the rates, others that are not. And the ones that are not are probably more like PG customers if you're thinking about our water treatment and things like that. But I do think there's probably a class of small commercial customers that are not really able to respond to the dinner time rate because, for example, they're a restaurant, and so that's just when their core operations are happening. So I think there's probably some nuance across different types of commercial customers, whether they can respond or they cannot.
Yeah. Thank you. Just one other sort of line here. You noted on page 14 of your answer testimony that the My Energy app makes understanding TOU rates very easy, but it's been downloaded a little less than 15,000 times by the 3.8 million electric customers in all of the Excel territory. I'm not sure how that translates into PSCo, but that's a little less than 0.5%. And we talk about only 1.2% of the customers having opted out of TOU, but maybe that's more a reflection of the level of engagement customers have with their utility than the acceptance of TOU. In fact, we've heard that, 53% don't really like it. So short of pulling a U2 and just automatically downloading the app on everybody's phone, what's your thinking about how we better engage customers, help with understanding, increase their comfort with TOU in general?
I mean, is the U2 idea on the table? I think that's an interesting, for
Yeah,
me
that was
personally, that'd be an interesting idea.
that was even less popular than TOU, I think.
Yeah, I think one thing that we think about a lot is certainly for some customers, the financial aspect is very important. And so, I mean, an obvious way to get customers' attention is if there's actually an opportunity for meaningful savings, meaningful financial savings. And I think that kind of ties back to what I was just saying about maybe a day ahead notification is on those days, there might actually be an opportunity for meaningful savings. The rest of the days, don't worry about it, but we'll let you know when you can actually save some real money here and actually benefit the system by shifting load. Um, I think that's the case that financial savings really are a good way to get people's attention, and there's no surprise there. I think there's a lot of customers that really respond to the opportunity to lower their emissions. And we're getting really close to a scenario where we really can meaningfully get towards zero emissions. Um, I think when you look at participation in voluntary programs, it's really high. Customers are really interested in reducing their emissions. And if you give them the tools to do that, they will do that. And right now, when you look at the proposed rates, at least in public services rebuttal case, there's no financial ability to save money if you shift from the 8 p.m. hour to the 4 p.m. hour. But when you look particularly across seasons, there's really meaningful opportunities to reduce emissions between 8 p.m. and 4 p.m. And so I think that's a shortcoming of the proposed, at least the PSCO rebuttal case proposed rates is emissions reduction is a way to engage customers, and there's other tools becoming available. Public Service is going to start promoting their day ahead renewable forecast this year. I think as soon as the first quarter. And I think when you look to April and May of this year, there's going to be some hours if the wind is blowing in the middle of the day where you could get pretty close to zero emissions. And customers should know about that, and they should have an opportunity to be able to capture that. And right now, when you tie that with the proposed financial savings, it's not there. So why you could save simply for or shift uses simply for emissions reduction, but pairing those two together, I think, is really valuable.
Is the downloading of the app necessary for that kind of engagement? Or, I mean, has that become a barrier for participation?
I don't think it's necessary. I think it's the easiest way to do it because people have phones on them at all times. I think you can go on the My Account website and look at your information and download it if you're sitting at a computer. I think I've always been curious to know if there are ways to extract the data from My Account to share it in other ways that customers are using their phones, whether it's through their Nest thermostat app or just other integrations that could be done with the usage data that exists. And I think that's been explored in other proceedings. I'm not an expert of it in this moment, but I think I would be curious to know if there's ways to kind of break access to share access from the My Account data to other more common customer facing apps.
Thanks. So yeah, I mean, I think finding the way, if we're going to do that kind of a notification sort of a thing, we'd have to make sure that we can actually notify people
Right.
effectively. One of the other things you brought up, and I think Commissioner Gilman sort of followed this line of questioning with the company a little bit, was around the disaggregation of the EV data. My understanding is that, while they have the data coming in from the AMI, they don't necessarily currently have the tools needed to sort of fingerprint the data and identify what's a EV and what's a hot tub. I don't know, and maybe you do, to what extent that's activation of certain capabilities of the meter versus, applying software to the analysis of that data. But any thoughts? I know you talked about that disaggregation within your testimony a little bit. Any thoughts you might have on that?
Yeah, I know that Public Services investigated EV load disaggregation in the transportation electrification plan. I think it's worthy of continued investigation. I think that it's probably unlikely if there is a significant demand spike at 5 p.m. in the summer that it's a hot tub that is heating up. It's, you know, very likely to be an electric car, although as we know, there's electrification of cooking, for example. There are things that, you know, maybe even a few years ago weren't the case, that if there was a demand spike at 5 p.m., it's probably a car. And I think it's important to get it right. I think it's important to be confident that the tool works. And so I think it would be great to have some direction to say, yes, let's figure out this tool, because we don't need to put it in second meter. We have enough communications between the meter, between the telematics in the car. Let's take advantage of the tools that we have available to us. So I'd be very supportive of going down that path further, just to make sure that tool works.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it, Mr. Lerman. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. That's all the questions I have.
No, appreciate you asking those questions. I did have one quick follow-up on your idea. Excel has a critical peak pricing program in Colorado, which on 22 hours advance notice, customers who commit to reduce their bill can get bill savings. Is that sort of what you're suggesting? I think it's a commercial program. Are you suggesting that we expand that to the residential sector, or are you suggesting more of an opt-out program with sort of like a super, you know, we've talked about super off-peak rates. Are you talking about a super on-peak rate in an opt-out basis, or are you talking about expanding the opt-in program? I was just confused.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's not something that we really explored in testimony. I think it could be either or both. I think there are advantages to identifying the specific hours that are very high costs and telling customers that it's going to be high cost tomorrow. Don't use, you know, shift your usage from 4 to 6 p.m. or whatever the time is. I think there's also advantages to using that system for something like curtailment reduction, and saying tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. there's a real opportunity to reduce curtailment and add, you know, renewables to the system. So if you can shift load, whatever it is, to that time period, you know, it's almost like the super off-peak version of it. So it could be either, it could be both, I think.
All right. Ms. Van Geem, typically we don't encourage redirect in response to commissioners' questions, but I'll offer you a limited opportunity.
No questions from me. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Gilman, I'll just offer you a chance, or are you good?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. With that, you may be excused. Thank you, Mr. Lerman.
Thank you.
Mr. Schlesinger.
I also could not find the hand raise button. I know this is unorthodox, but I did want to point out for your awareness that based on the discussion you were just having with Mr. Lerman, Mr. Lucas did include some testimony in his cross answer regarding a critical peak rebate program, which I think is similar to the idea that you were just discussing with Mr. Lerman. And I just want to let you know that Mr. Lucas is still on the line and would be happy to answer questions about that proposal to the extent you want to continue that discussion.
Commissioner Plant, do you have questions for Mr. Lucas?
I don't have any specific questions for him, but if he wanted to come on and we could have a discussion around how he feels that would be implemented and what sort of the limitations might be that we might be able to address. I think that would be, I would appreciate that conversation.
All right. Mr. Lucas, can you turn on your camera? There you are.
Apologies, sir. My attorney caught me a little bit offline there. I wasn't expecting to be back on, so apologies for the attire. Yes,
hold on. Can you hold up your right hand? Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Is anybody with you or communicating with you in any way?
No.
If that changes, you'll let us know?
Yes.
You have some brief comments about your cross-answer testimony consistent with Commissioner Plant's questions. We'd welcome it.
Yes, very briefly, just as Mr. Schlesinger pointed out, there are programs that do very similar things to what you're talking about. So I'm in the Maryland area, and we've been running what is called a critical peak rebate program for a number of years. It was implemented along with our AMI implementation at our utilities. And what it allows is for the utility to call a day ahead, basically a voluntary request for customers to shift their usage. So because the AMI data allows the utility to determine sort of a baseline usage, they can determine how much customers actually shift under the event. And then instead of charging them more for usage during a certain period, which is the critical peak pricing approach, it actually can produce a rebate based on a reduction in usage for those customers. So if I'm a customer who typically uses, let's say, 10 kilowatt hours across a peak period, and during an event call, I'm able to reduce my usage and I use 8 kilowatt hours, the company is able to calculate that difference and then provide a credit on my account based on a certain rate. And in Maryland, we use a rate of $1.25 per kilowatt hour. So it's a reasonably large incentive for customers to shift their usage. But the key advantage here is that if one is not able to shift their usage, unlike a critical peak pricing program where any usage will be billed at a higher rate, in this case, if I don't reduce my usage, there's no additional penalty. I simply don't get a rebate. So as the gentleman from Boulder was talking about, you could use this on a proactive basis. If tomorrow is a period where you want customers to reduce their usage, or if you want them to shift into the off-peak period, you could send those signals. Here we get them via text message. It also, I believe, is coordinated in with a smart thermostat program that we run, where you can have those trigger some automatic responses as well, provided that the customer is signed into these. And it allows these sort of voluntary demand reductions to come through on an ad hoc basis that can be separate and distinct from underlying tariff that exists. So it's been a very successful program in Maryland that we've run for a number of years.
Commissioner
Thank you.
Plant,
Yeah, thanks. And so it sounds like it's kind of maybe a combination of a DR and a sort of, bring your own savings that when it's combined with an event, gets an incentive payment to customers. How is do you know how is the communication done through just a simple text, or is it, through some sort of other engagement, like an app?
I think there's multiple types of communication. I believe an email is an option and text is an option as well. When I had signed up on these tariffs as part of our voluntary demand response programs that was tied into our smart thermostat, you opt into a text message. And so I would get periodic texts saying, hey, tomorrow is a high energy day, conserve, and save money. So it was a very simple communications protocol. I believe you could get emails that came through as well in those instances, and the customer would choose that. And again, it would be all voluntary, and there would be no penalty if a customer is not able to reduce their amount. It just helps some of that load shaping for those unusual events that the utility can anticipate in advance.
Sure. Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you very much.
hey, I will ask my one question.
Certainly.
I was just, as I was reading your testimony in this case, I was reflecting on your testimony in the phase 2 rate case. And in terms of your definition of peak demand periods, you've come a long way. Just curious if you have any, really briefly, any thoughts on what changed, and appreciate the evolution in your thinking.
I think thank you for the question. I think it's a number of things. I think it's just a function of the dramatic change that Colorado has already experienced and is going to experience going forward. When I started looking at some of these cases probably 4 or 5 years ago, the state was in a very different place. It was before, the policies that had been implemented to do a long-term decarbonization. It was before the electric plans that were going to bring on new types of load. And it was before the amount of solar and renewables and wind that the state had increased to the degree that it had. So I think that there, just necessarily as the underlying data has presented a challenge against some of the old time of use rates. And I think recognizing that the needs are going to be different in the future from what they are, supported the idea of having a later period than what we had previously advocated for. I think the part about the shift that is important to realize is a lot of discussion has happened, is it does need to be something that customers are able to respond to, which is why we're advocating also for a relatively shorter period that can be addressed not only through behavior changes, but through technology changes. And we're cognizant about some of the other programs that are being proposed in the virtual power plants, trying to increase the amount of solar and storage that is being deployed, and then using that technology to really help customers manage through these. So I don't think it's purely going to be customers make individual choices about, turning on this appliance or turning off that appliance. I think there needs to be a rate that can be responded to through technology changes. And the solar industry in general has been shifting towards trying to get more policies that support solar plus storage. And I think a well-designed time of use rate in this context can help do that as well.
Well, without in any way prejudging anything, I just want to say I appreciate your data-driven evolution. With that, I think Mr. Schlesinger, again, in response to the commission questions, I'm going to try and limit redirect. With that, Mr. Lucas, you can be excused. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next, I have UCA witness Kuykendall. Can you hold up your right hand, sir? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You can put your hand down. Is anybody with you or communicating with you in any way?
No.
If that changes, will you let us know?
Sure will.
With that, Mr. Wittershan.
Good morning, Mr. Kuykendall. Can you hear me?
Good morning, yes.
Could you please state and spell your name for the record?
Harry Kuykendall, Kerry Kuykendall.
And are you the same Kerry Kuykendall who provided answer testimony on behalf of the UCA in this proceeding?
Yes.
If I asked you those same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Mr. Kuykendall is available for cross-examination.
Mr. Mansholt, I have 10 minutes for you.
Thank you. And I think my cross is fairly brief. And thank you for being here today, sir. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm just gonna have some questions about some of your stakeholder testimony. You are aware that Public Service held 2 stakeholder meetings before it filed its advice letter in this proceeding. And those meetings were held on July 25th and August 21st. Does that sound right?
Yes.
You did not personally attend the company's July 25th stakeholder meeting on its TOU proposals, did you?
No, I did not.
You also did not personally attend the company's August 21st stakeholder meeting on its TOU proposals, did you?
No, I did not.
Despite not attending those meetings yourself, it is your testimony to this commission that the company failed to incorporate the stakeholder feedback provided at those meetings into its TOU proposals. Is that correct?
That's correct. We asked a number of questions in discovery related to customer engagement. We asked, we looked for the incorporation of notes from those meetings into the decision-making of the company, and we've seen none.
Okay. You don't have any notes from those stakeholder meetings, do you?
No, I don't.
Don't you think it would have been helpful for you to attend the stakeholder meetings that preceded the company's filing for you to understand whether and to what extent the company incorporated stakeholder feedback into its proposals?
I was not assigned the case at the time that the stakeholder meetings were held, or I would have been there.
Understood. No other party in this proceeding has filed testimony that the company failed to incorporate stakeholder feedback into its proposals. Is that right?
Not that I have read.
Sure. I'd like to open up from box.com the exhibit that is pre-marked for identification as hearing exhibit 109. And you see, sir, that this is public services discovery request to the UCA, which is called PSGO 1-5. Does that sound right?
Yes.
If we scroll down, you are the sponsor of this on December 23rd. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you questions about this. Instead, I'm just going to seek its admission into the record, given you're the sponsor of it.
Mr. Witterstein, any objection?
No objection.
So moved.
And thank you for being here. That's all the questions I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Manchell. Commissioner Gellman, questions for Mr. Kuykendall?
Hi, good morning, Mr. Kuykendall.
Good morning.
Just briefly, as you understand it, would you agree with me that part of the premise of time of use rates is to reduce the overall resource and infrastructure needs by either de-pancaking or kind of removing the peak of usage on the system?
I would agree.
So as I understand it, UCA's perspective is to kind of more or less stay the course with the current rate structure. Is that fair for time of use?
Yes.
So if we stick to the time periods you suggest, several other witnesses point to significant evidence on this record that we may or could even likely miss the net system peak, increasingly so, in the coming years, which is expected to drive significant investment. So I'm trying to understand from UCA's perspective how your proposal would be in the public interest if it may not lead to a minimization of that peak and those infrastructure needs coming.
Well, I think from UCA standpoint, from a rate design standpoint, I think that the price signal that is sent to customers related to how they are using energy should be one that allows them to make the adjustment, if you will, in order to take advantage of lower rates or lower bills during their usage. By spreading out or by increasing the time, the on-peak time, we feel that families will not be allowed or not have the ability to adjust that usage during the family time from the time period from when they get off of work to when they go to bed. We don't feel like there hasn't been any evidence that the usage during those times is wasteful, is inefficient, but we feel that increasing the prices on those customers during that time is going to be onerous and will not allow them to adjust their usage.
Okay, and I understand from your testimony, a lot of the perspective is on kind of the inability to shift all your usage away, not do any cooking, not do any laundry, whatever it might be. I had a conversation with Mr. Hagland yesterday, and he more characterized it as kind of an incremental approach where it's not every load of laundry, but if you can move one or two in the week to the weekend or outside the time, that customers are expected to still do better under this rate in large part. So just curious, any reactions to that idea which I think stands in contrast to some of your testimony about the inability to move all usage and Mr. Haglund's perspective that just being able to move some usage, whatever's manageable, could still result in savings to the customers under the analysis.
Well, I think that under the initial rollout of the time of use rates, you have had some adjustment of customer usage, and I think that those adjustments, those minor adjustments around when they wash clothes or when they use a dishwasher, those have already that was the low-hanging fruit, if you will, and that's already been done. And so really, we believe that the next level of curtailment, or the first level of next level of reduction, is going to be to those activities that are taking place between 5 and 9 for customers who are migrating to and from work and to and from school.
Thank you. Those are my only questions.
Commissioner Plam.
I have no further questions.
I do not have any questions either, so thank you, Mr. Kuykendall. Well, Mr. Witterson, do you have any redirect?
No redirect for me. Thank you.
Mr. Kuykendall, you may be excused. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Bennett, are you out there?
Sorry, I was having issues there unmuting. Can you hear and see me fine?
You're good. You're good. We can see and hear you. Can you hold up your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Put your hand down. Is anybody with you or communicating with you in any way?
No.
If that changes, will you let us know?
Yes.
Back to you, Ms. Stockmeyer.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr. Bennett.
Good morning.
Can you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Certainly. It's Andrew Bennett, E-E-N-N-E-T-T, 2 T's.
And on whose behalf are you here today?
On behalf of Energy Outreach Colorado.
And did you cause to be pre-filed into this case hearing exhibit 601, revision 1, with attachments?
I did.
And if you were asked those questions today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bennett is available for cross and commission questions.
I have trial staff, Ms. McLaughlin. I have 15 minutes. Ms. Hayden. You're up.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jennifer Hayden. I'm an Assistant Attorney General with the Colorado Department of Law, representing trial staff of the Public Utilities Commission in this proceeding. Good morning, Mr. Bennett.
Good morning. Pleased to meet you.
Pleased to meet you. Mr. Bennett, you filed testimony in this case on behalf of EOC and recommended keeping the TOU period the same. To confirm, it's your testimony that EOC's preference is to maintain the current TOU rates and periods, correct?
Correct.
And in support of this recommendation, did you include any analysis in your answer testimony regarding the periods of peak load on the company's system?
No.
Mr. Bennett, do you think PSCO needs to consider non-residential electric loads when operating its system and planning for future growth?
I mean, that's outside of what EOC is talking about. We're talking about residential rates. As far as system planning and loads, I think staff's aware EOC does not intervene in the ERPs and other planning dockets like that. So I think for me to answer that would be outside of the EOC's, my testimony and our normal scope of testimony and dockets we intervene in.
Okay. But would you agree that residential is not the only class?
I would agree that there are more classes than residential, yes.
Okay. Did you analyze how PSCO's gross peak load window will change this year?
No.
Did you analyze how the net peak load window is forecasted to change in 2028?
No.
Or 2031?
No.
Mr. Bennett, did you analyze how the company's coal generation retirements in 2031 will impact the company's system?
No.
So that didn't play any role in EOC's development of its recommendations?
No.
Mr. Bennett, we just talked about EOC's recommendations that the commission maintain the current TOU rates. If the commission decides to change the on-peak window, you recommend they shorten that on-peak period from 6 to 9 p.m. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did your analysis, or did you do any analysis on how many gross load hours between 6 to 9 p.m. window would encompass during a year?
No.
Did you do any analysis on how many net load hours this 6 to 9 p.m. window would encompass during a year?
No.
And your recommendation for the 6 to 9 p.m. window, that's because it would be easier for customers to plan around. Do I have that right?
You do not.
You have an additional recommendation that suggests that customers have a shortened time period between 6 to 9 as opposed to staff's recommendations at other time periods. Is that right?
I think the proper way to characterize it was my testimony stated that if the commission was to order a peak that must end at 9 p.m., that we should have a short peak and that should only be 3 hours.
If the only goal of TOU rates were ease of customer use, would a shorter on-peak period, 1 hour window, be easier for customers to shift their usage around?
Could you rephrase that? Just make sure I heard you right.
Sure. If the only goal of TOU rates were ease of customer use, wouldn't a 1 hour peak window be easier for customers to shift their usage around?
Yes, if your only concern was ease of use, then yes.
Mr. Bennett, I'd like to switch gears and ask you some questions related to bill impacts.
Sure.
As you know, the company's proposal changed with the filing of its rebuttal testimony, and you analyzed PSCo's rate proposals from its direct case, right?
Correct.
And in your analysis, do you agree most ratepayers would see a bill decrease under that proposal?
We were discussing median. I'd have to pull up the exact chart just off the top of my head. It just skipped right out. So if you want to go to that chart, my testimony, I can't remember which one it is.
Yes. If we could please pull up what's been marked as hearing exhibit 600, Mr. Bennett's testimony at page 18.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just conflating Mr. Nussbaumer's charts in my head with mine since he analyzed everything.
All right. I'd like to, in line 16 through 19, and this is your testimony, correct?
You scroll up to the top so I can see the header. I just missed it. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Line 16 through 19, you had based your customer usage data available for 2023, where customers may even save a few dollars over the course of the year from a change in that schedule. Is that right?
Yes, with the caveat that the word may is in there.
Okay. And that's based on customer usage data from 2023?
Correct.
And that's without changing any behavior, right?
Right.
And it does include income qualified customers, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And you had just said your colleague, Mr. Nussbaumer, analyzed staff's proposals, correct?
Correct.
And in his testimony, he concluded that over 75% of ratepayers would see an overall bill decrease under staff's options, yes?
Not all of them. You would need to pull up his if you want to look at the specific decreases, because I think there was 4 or 5 from staff, and not all were the same.
Yes, let's do that. If we could please pull up Mr. Nussbaumer's testimony, hearing exhibit 602. And please go to page 8. Mr. Bennett, I'd like to direct your attention here to this table. This is Mr. Nussbaumer's analysis.
Right. And I believe your question was that you said over 70% would see savings under staff options.
Yes, if more specifically, if we were to take a look at staff's options 3A and 4A, based on those calculations, 75% of ratepayers would see an overall bill decrease under those options. Is that right?
Roughly.
Okay. Do you have any reason to contradict Mr. Nussbaumer?
No.
Okay. 75% of ratepayers that would see a bill decrease in their bills includes IQ customers, right?
Yes. Well, at what proportion that you would have to ask Mr. Nussbaumer, but
Thanks. I will have the opportunity to do so. And Mr. Nussbaumer concludes that that's true even without customers changing their behavior. Is that right?
right.
Okay. Mr. Bennett, thank you. I have no further questions for this witness.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hayden. Commissioner Gilman, questions for Mr. Bennett?
Just briefly, good morning, Mr. Bennett.
Good morning. How are you today?
Good, how are you?
Well, thank you.
So I understand from your answer testimony some concern about both the understanding and ability, particularly of IQ customers, to adapt to time of use rates kind of generally. Is that fair?
That's fair.
And I know you pointed out in your answer testimony that in the pilot for time of use, you saw kind of less shifting for IQ customers. And I was just curious, now that time of use rates have been in effect for several years for some customers who got AMI in the earlier phases, has that borne out more broadly? And do you have any actual results from IQ customers on time of use, like more broadly, to understand if those concerns have actually come to fruition?
Yeah, not that we've done like a specific study, but since we have teams that are out in the community constantly, I talk with those teams about their experience with income qualified customers. I think in general, I think customers that are having difficulty paying bills have faced disconnections. There's kind of a general mistrust, and I think that's what EOC is trying to avoid. I think there were some questions earlier about customer buy-in and trust of utilities, and we do see issues around that, and we see confusion. Some customers, you explain the rates to them, or they have the marketing material that they may have received, or that they've heard word of mouth from their neighbors and friends about time of use, and there's just confusion and mistrust. And we try to work around that. We partner with Excel and others to explain people's rates, and when we're talking about how they can get assistance, part of that is educating somebody on how they can save money. And I think it's the difficulty in explaining that and overcoming those hurdles where people think that they just can't use energy during this time. That's difficult. So when we talk about a long and late peak, there's a lot of fear that we're hearing and we're seeing in public comments and other social media posts about people being fearful of punitive measures as opposed to a way to save on their bills. And I think those are the concerns we have. So, for my testimony, talking about like the original positions, it was more, if we're going to get customer buy-in and we want customers to be able to do this, to have those good behavior responses, rates that feel punitive to them, while we may mathematically say, oh, well, it works this way, perception's different than math.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Perhaps one thing that can change perception is math. And so I'm just curious, given all of the concerns, I'm a little surprised that at this point there is no analysis to say how are IQ customers doing more broadly under time of use. We have years of data, it seems. So it seems like we have a lot of concerns, and I agree with you, some mistrust and maybe misinformation. We're hearing several other witnesses say the majority of customers should expect a rate decrease. And so it seems as though any analysis to understand how this is actually going could be very helpful to inform opinions here, but I'm not seeing any.
You know, I guess one point of analysis you could look at is if you looked at our annual reports, you'd see that every year we have more and more customers being assisted with more and more dollars. So I would say, are customers having issues with affordability and adjusting? You know, if you wanted a data point, we could look at the fact that no matter how much more we're raising, we're still helping more people. So I think if you were looking for a data point, there is one. I mean, it's not quite a study, like you said, but you know, this is also a bit difficult to analyze, you know, 20,000 customer bills that come in for assistance. You know, we just don't have the capability to import all of their data from Excel. So there's just not the kind of communications channels we would need, or like the APIs between our systems to pull that analysis for everyone that comes in for assistance either.
Right.
Or
And
maybe
I
there is, but that'd be a
understand.
lot of privacy issues as well.
Yeah, and I understand. I mean, but part of the problem in just saying we're helping more people, which I appreciate. Thank you for your work. You know, we understand there are many people probably who qualify who are not getting assistance. So not to say more people have fallen kind of below the line, but perhaps more people are seeking the assistance who are entitled, which is ideal in a lot of aspects. But also rates are going up generally, independent of the rate design. And so yeah, just a suggestion that it might be helpful for us to get some more granular analysis, you know, and maybe we get there out of this to actually understand kind of the abilities and experiences, particularly of IQ customers under these rates. Because it seems to me we would be aided by more data here than thoughts on what might happen.
Right. And I know, I believe you worked with Group 14 recently, I think last year, on doing some analysis like this. And, you know, that's analysis we would be interested in doing as well. I think that once we start looking beyond, you know, just our in-house capabilities, that does cost money. So, you know, if we did want to do stuff like that, there would have to be funding available for those kinds of studies as well.
Okay. Just one other kind of follow-up line you point out in your testimony, and we've already heard today, just the really low number of customers utilizing the My Energy Connect app, 0.1% looks like in your testimony. And I understand you have some internet availability concerns, particularly for the population you're working with. Set that aside for a second. It seems as though that's a tool that could give people this more granular understanding and information instead of just being shocked by a bill at the end of the month, to actually be able to see and manage throughout the month, you know, what is going on, where am I using it, when am I using it? So just curious if you had any thoughts, particularly among the IQ population, who I think very much could use this immediate feedback to understand how much am I using and what's causing it, you know, and how high is my bill going before just showing up at the register and figuring out what you owe. How could we encourage more usage of that as a tool to really enhance customers' understanding, not just of the rates, but of like what's contributing to their total bill and their usage?
Yeah, you know, I hate to deflect. I would say Dr. Nussbaumer, with his experience, may have more ideas on how you increase customer enrollment or, you know, consumer engagement with an app. I will say that could be complicated for the IQ population. This is a population, and we talk to people all the time, they purposely avoid opening envelopes from Excel. They're concerned it might be a disconnection notice, something else, or it's a bill they can't pay, so, you know, they set it off to the side. They're not opening these envelopes. I think for a population like that is already having concerns of opening physical mail, having an app that's going to send them notifications that'll pop up and be or could be intrusive depending on your settings on applications, or that's right there, that may be difficult, right? So I think, yeah, you know, I think that it means we'll have to have some strong communication plans, a lot of outreach, and building up goodwill. You know, I think with a concerted effort, I think 1,600 is the 0.1% out of the 1.6 million. I don't have my calculator nearby, so I can't, you know, double check my own math there, but I don't think it would be difficult to increase those numbers, and maybe we could do that, with specific IQ marketing and events. But like I said, it'd probably take a bit of work for a population that's already scared of getting physical mail about having Excel, and not trying to disparage Excel, but literally having Excel following you around everywhere you go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's that versus like I'm communicating with them, checking out my usage on my terms. I get to go in and check, how I'm doing this month without the outreach from the utility. Who knows? So, but thank you. Appreciate it. Those are my only questions.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Flynn.
Thanks. Good morning, Mr. Bennett.
Good morning, Commissioner.
I just had a real quick question. I think, when we think about, different families engaging with time of use, we generally think about a 9 to 5 job and that sort of thing. I'm just wondering, we've had some discussion within the testimony around, things like super off-peak rates that might happen during the day to sort of align with renewable production, maybe renewable overproduction. And I'm wondering, when talking about the IQ population, obviously some are fall into a 9 to 5, but do you have a greater population of people who fall outside of that 9 to 5 who might benefit from those kinds of rate structures that are going to be sort of reducing the cost of energy during the day when others might be at work?
We don't have specific data on that. And Mr. Nussbaumer did some bill analysis on load shaping, and I think that might indicate when people are versus aren't home. And it seemed, you speak with him about this, but it seemed they were kind of, at least for the ones we had, tracking along the median average load shapes. So I don't have a great answer for you on, are these people working second shift with, 3 to 11 or third shift, that graveyard shift or not. I think if you think about like the businesses, and I guess you could look at employment statistics, but how many businesses are open to 11 p.m. at night? How many people are working that? How many people are working graveyards? I think that might give you an idea of whether or not people are working at those times or not.
Do you find in general that your IQ population load curve basically reflects so similar to what we're looking at in the overall population?
Yes. And again, I just double check with Mr. Nussbaumer, but it was generally in similar load shaping.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then just one thing, sorry, you asked a question yesterday about IBR TOU and or somewhere along that. So an inclining block rate time use, where once you hit a certain amount, you get like an adder. There actually is an IBR TOU in public services service territory, but it's in their gas service territory. Fort Collins Electric Municipal has an IBR TOU. So if you're interested, they do on their website show you how it looks in their bill, but they also have a calculator as well.
The municipal utility?
Yes.
Has that. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So if you go to their rates, there's a calculator and you can slide around, season, how much you use, and it pops out your bill. Granted, their structure is different, and it's based on a 700 watt or kilowatt hour block.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Just, was that on the gas or electric side? I was confused.
Sorry. So it's within XL Gas service territory in Fort Collins, and the electric provider is Fort Collins Municipal Electric.
So it's not an XL service territory. It's in Fort Collins. It's the Fort Collins Municipal Utility on the gas distribution side has an inverter.
Right. It's where their gas system is in Fort Collins, not. So it's yes and no. Right.
So it's Fort Collins electric rate in public service, but public service supplies the gas.
Correct.
Okay. I don't have any additional questions. Ms. Stockmeyer, any redirect on the Public Service Company cross.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Bennett. Just briefly, staff's attorney was asking you about EOC's recommendations, and just quickly, with regard to maintaining the current time of use period, what's your understanding of staff's proposal in that regard?
Maintaining the current time of use period, they do not want to maintain the current period.
Or in terms of when they want the rate to be changed?
Right. They have various options, but they have proposed between going to 10 and going to 9 in different options.
Right. But aren't you guys in agreement that those rate changes wouldn't happen until after summer 25, whatever happens in this proceeding?
Correct.
Okay. And in terms of the alternative recommendation that you've made, if the time of use rate period is approved, can you clarify again what EOC's proposal is and why you're making it?
Certainly. So, our initial proposal is that TOU rates remain the same. And this is also predicated on the fact that these are supposed to go into effect summer 2025. In the alternative, should the commission decide that TOU rates must end later in the evening at that 9 p.m. hour, that to help families, rather than having those 5 hours or basically all hours that they're home until about going to sleep, that we shorten the TOU period to only 3 hours from 6 to 9, so that there would be an ability to do some pre-cooling or even some cooking or other things earlier in the day, as opposed to not being able to do so.
Okay. And I believe lastly, Chair, if I may, I know you want limited redirect.
Yeah, you're good. You can
I just-
redirect all commissioner questions. And I apologize, it was staff cross, not Excel cross. So, but yeah, keep going.
Okay, just to the extent it would be helpful, Mr. Bennett referred to a Fort Collins rate, and it might be helpful just to have that in the record. We have some snapshots from their website which show that rate option, just as something to add to the record, if it'd be helpful.
I'm a little nervous without Excel having the ability to see it ahead of time and cross Mr. Bennett on that.
We could, if you want to just pull it up and take a peek.
Mr. Foreman, Mr. Sarah, any advice? Mr. Foreman?
I believe Miss Stockmeyer can use it to cross. Can you repeat, Miss Stockmeyer, what you're intending to do?
I was
I mean, this isn't cross, this is redirect.
Right, and I was just gonna cite, we have pulled up in EOC's boxes marked hearing exhibit 609, which is snapshots from the City of Fort Collins website about their time of use pricing, and really I think it just adds to the record in this case about available rate options.
Mr. Manchell?
I'd be willing to, before weighing in on objection, just seeing the exhibit. I haven't seen them previously. They weren't shared previously. I'd be at least willing to see it before providing a position.
Ms. Hayden?
Your Honor, at this point, staff would object to the introduction of any new information here. May go beyond the scope of cross as well.
I think I agree, Ms. Stockmeyer, although I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I guess the conversation has raised this rate option, and so just to the extent it might be helpful for the commission to see that what
right.
that is.
Why don't you put it up?
Thanks. And if we scroll down, should I have it before me? I think on page 2 of this, there's just a kind of a written summary of what the rates are. I believe the actual rate are, I apologize. Let me pull this up. There's a could you
Pretty
scroll down?
uncomfortable with this. I'm just I don't think this is proper on redirect on an issue that Mr. Bennett raised on his own motion. I know Tom, I know Commissioner Plant's personally interested in this, as am I. But I just don't think there's I don't think this is proper on redirect. So I'm gonna, unless you're no longer objecting, Ms. Hayden.
No, Your Honor, staff will renew its objection. I think that, again, this goes beyond the scope of cross, was not in response to a specific commissioner question, and was just suggested by Mr. Bennett.
I as much as I think this is useful, I think I have to agree. Ms. Stockmeyer, do you have a response?
I think this has been an unusual case, and to the extent you're making really big decisions about people's lives and their utility bills, I think it's appropriate for you to use discretion and put it in the record.
Ms. Hayden?
Your Honor, staff stands on its prior objections. It was confusing questioning too when Mr. Bennett testified that this was PSCO territory and their company, but it's not electric, it's not gas, and it's Fort Collins. I think we're out of bounds there.
Objection is sustained. If you could take this down, that'd be appreciated. Ms. Stockmeyer, anything else on redirect?
No, I think just one more point. Commissioner Gilman was asking you about some analysis that EOC may or may not have done on income qualified customers. Is Mr. Nussbaumer available to discuss any analysis he did with regard to income qualified customers?
He is.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett, you may be excused.
Thank you.
Mr. Nussbaumer, you out there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can. Can you put up your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You can put your hand down. Is anybody with you or communicating with you in any way?
There's not.
If that changes, will you let us know?
I will.
Back to you, Ms. Stockmeyer.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Nussbaumer. Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Sure. My name is Eric Nussbaumer. The last name is N as in November, USS, B as in Bravo, AU, M as in Mike, ER.
Thank you, Mr. Nussbaumer, and I appreciate the correction on pronunciation. Have you caused testimony to be filed in this case on behalf of Energy Outreach Colorado?
I have.
And are you employed by Energy Outreach Colorado?
I am.
In what capacity?
I am the VP of Data Operations.
Okay. And your testimony was pre-filed as hearing exhibit 601 and 602. If I were to ask you the questions in those testimonies, would your answers be the same?
They would, yes.
Okay. Mr. Nussbaumer is available for cross and commission questions.
Public Service Company, you have 20 minutes.
Morning.
Good morning.
Nice to meet you, and thank you for being here.
Thanks.
I heard Mr. Bennett refer to you at least a few times as Dr. Nussbaumer. Is that your preference, or do you have a preference?
There is no preference at all, yeah.
Okay.
Are you a doctor?
Yes, I am. Depending on if you ask my kids, I'm not a real doctor, as in a medical doctor, but I do have a PhD.
I think this commission would prefer to call you Dr. Nussbaumer, if I got the name right. So, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ranchel.
Absolutely. Want to recognize the years of education for sure. Sir, your cross-answer testimony and surrebuttal testimony frequently refers to the term price signal. Would you agree?
Yes.
my limited questions here today are really just about use of that term. And when you use that term price signal, generally what we're referencing is that customers can respond and change their consumption behavior if they receive price encouragement to do so. Is that fair?
I'm sorry, are you asking me if that's a definition of price signal?
Yeah, I'm trying to get it. I don't see it, a strict definition of the term in your testimony, and I'm not trying to have you provide a Webster definition, but generally, would you agree that the term refers to the fact that customers can respond and change their consumption behavior if they receive price encouragement to do so?
Sure. I think actually in my testimony, I do strictly define how I use price signal. If I remember correctly, so when I define a positive and negative price signal, the positive price signal is the difference that a customer sees, and there's two bases for those price signals, which I elaborate in the testimony. But basically, the price signal is the difference the customer would see between a proposed bill and the proposed rate and the current rate that they're on. So a positive price signal in that sense is if a customer sees an increase in their bill for a proposed rate versus the basis, which is the current rate. And I define a negative price signal as a decrease in that bill. And I define those on two different bases. I think it's important to note that there's price signals on an annual basis. So that's when a customer's annual bill is higher or lower for a proposed rate as compared to the current rate. And then there's price signals on a monthly scale, and monthly time scale. And that's when a customer sees a higher or a lower bill, basically on a month basis.
Okay, that's helpful clarification. As opposed to just your definitions of a positive or negative price signal, a TOU rate itself can deliver a price signal to a customer by encouraging them to shift load out of higher priced hours of the day, called an on-peak period, to lower price hours of the day, called the off-peak period. Correct?
I'm just gonna object. I think that Mr. Nussbaumer, or Dr. Nussbaumer has answered the question about what's in his testimony, and this follow-up question is outside the scope of his testimony.
Can you say the question again?
Dr. Nussbaumer can't testify about whether a TOU rate can provide an individual price signal or not. I'm happy to hear that.
Objection overruled. If you could repeat your question for the witness, that'd be great.
Sure. A TOU rate itself can deliver a price signal to a customer by encouraging them to shift load out of higher price signals of the day, called the on-peak period, to lower price hours of the day, called the off-peak period. Is that right?
I think there is debate in the literature about the effectiveness of those price signals. So, for example, in Harding and Sexton 2017, they reviewed a whole bunch of different rates, and they found that, within those different studies of looking at time varying rates, they found that some studies found no statistically significant difference in household consumption behavior. I think you can also go back to Stigler 1961, and I think that's when economists have first really understood that consumers or buyers incur a search cost to learn about a seller's price. And in this case, the seller's price would be the time of use values. And so that search cost can really affect the market performance. And with electricity demand response, I think it's even more complicated in the sense that a user or a consumer has to not only understand an abstract quantity, so how many consumers actually understand what a kilowatt hour is. I think not many people actually understand what that abstract quantity is. I think that consumers incur that surge cost not only to understand what those rates are, right? Those rates have to be communicated with them. They have to understand what those rates are. But I think consumers also incur a surge cost in terms of understanding the electricity cost of their behaviors, right? How many people actually understand, if I use my oven for an hour, what is the electricity consumption in kilowatt hours actually compared to, using the microwave for 5 minutes? I would argue that not many people are able to tell you how much energy they incur using various components, right? So how do they know how much to save? I think what is concrete to consumers is a monthly bill, right? We all understand at the end of the month what we have to pay for that electricity cost. And again, going back to Harding and Sexton, I think their research really highlights this, that consumers are unable to acquire. It's difficult to acquire that finely spatial temporal resolution of information of how much energy they're consuming at each hour, what their activities consume. And right, they're really focused on those month-to-month bills. So that is why in my testimony, I really define price signals on those month-to-month basis.
Okay, that's helpful clarification. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about how a customer could reasonably or not respond to the price signal term as you use it, involving a difference of monthly or annual bills under the current TOU or revised TOU proposals in this case. Under your term of price signal, after the revised TOU rates are in effect and are implemented, to understand the price signal as you use it, a customer would need to compare its bills for the same months of 2 different years or year-over-year bills in aggregate. Is that right?
I wouldn't necessarily say that's the only way to do it. I think customers can also understand what they paid last month. I think within a month to month, like adjacent months, there's a close enough similarity to energy use that they can say, hey, last month I paid this and this month I paid, X. So, if there's a big price difference there, they sense that. I think that's not the only way to do it, is that, looking at the previous year or the previous 2 years is not the only way.
What way do you expect customers to do it? Is it by looking at previous months or the just preceding month?
I mean, I guess I think it depends on the customer, and I wouldn't really want to speculate without having any data or any studies about that. I wouldn't be able to speculate on that.
Okay. Across months, the company is frequently updating its rates, where updates can take the form of fuel cost adjustments, rate rider updates, and base rate changes. Is that right?
I guess I'm not up to speed on that. So, I mean, I wouldn't be able to say if that's right or not. I'm not sure. I guess, yeah. I mean, I would have to ask somebody at the company whether that's true or not.
Okay. For customers to receive the price signal as you define it, do you have any input on whether or not a customer would need to go through some sort of normalization process to subtract out changes in rates that differ between months as the company's updating its rates so they can have an apples to apples comparison?
Sorry, can you restate that question?
Sure. For customers to receive the price signal as you're defining it, wouldn't they need in their calculation and analysis to have an apples comparison to understand rate changes that occurred in the prior month and normalize those out such that they're understanding the true price signal being sent?
Um, I mean, that's it. When you talk about like normalizing a price signal, I mean, I hate to say it, I don't think customers are as sophisticated to be able to determine like, when a rate changed and being able to normalize that out. I think part of the issue is that, we all are fully engrossed in the energy domain. We understand a lot of energy terminology and we follow it pretty closely, whereas the average customer is not that familiar with like the energy industry. So I think, a customer probably does not necessarily know when a rate changes, and so they wouldn't necessarily be able to make that normalization. I think I mean, you can think about it in terms of grocery bills, right? A customer may not necessarily be following the price of milk, but I think what happens at the point of checkout for a grocery store, a customer has some elasticity or memory of what the previous bill would be and compares that to the current bill, right? So, I remember I used to spend $150 every Costco visit, and now it's up to like $200, right? So there's some elasticity in the memory of the previous purchase. I don't think people are necessarily following in detail changes in rates to that extent. I think the more the memory is of what did I pay last time, and what is it compared to this time. Does that make sense?
It does to me, absolutely.
Okay.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manshall. Ms. Hayden.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Nussbaumer, my name is Jennifer Hayden. I'm an Assistant Attorney General with the Colorado Department of Law, representing trial staff of the Public Utilities Commission in this proceeding. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Dr. Nussbaumer, I want to ask you a few questions about your rebuttal testimony. In it, you respond to staff's recommendations put forth in cross-answer testimony, correct?
I did, yes.
Can we please pull up what has been marked as Hearing Exhibit 602? This is Mr. Nussbaumer's testimony. If we could please turn to page 6. Dr. Nussbaumer, this is your rebuttal testimony, is it not?
It is, yeah.
I'd like to draw your attention to lines 14 through 19, if we could scroll down a bit. Here you testified you analyzed staff's positions 3A and 4A, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And if we could scroll down to page 8. I'd like to ask you, thank you. Dr. Nussbaumer, I'd like to ask you a few questions about the table we're looking at here.
Mm-hmm.
This is your table EN1. Both of staff's proposed rates and options 3A and 4A that you reviewed, over 75% of ratepayers will see a decrease in their bills, correct?
I would not say so. Staff option 1 is 26%, so that's less than 75. So I wouldn't say over 75%, but I mean, you could say approximately 75% would see a bill that either does not change or is less.
Thanks, Dr. Nussbaumer. I'd ask specifically in relation to options 3A and 4A that you reviewed.
Oh, yeah. In that case, yes.
Okay. And that doesn't require anyone to change their behavior, right?
This is given no change in behavior.
And this includes income qualified customers, right?
I'm assuming it does, but I did not conduct the analysis to determine the quantity or the percentage of IQ customers that it doesn't include.
Okay. Do you think it's fair to assume that if residential ratepayers are able to make any changes at all, even small ones, then the percentage of ratepayers that would see a bill decrease would be even higher than 75%?
Can you restate that again?
Certainly. Do you think it's fair to assume that if residential ratepayers are able to make any changes at all, even small ones, then the percentage of ratepayers that would see bill decreases would be even higher than 75%?
I think I wouldn't speculate without seeing the data. I think it's a little bit more complex than that because the influence of those price signals, those, as I define positive and negative price signals, have distinct load shape profiles. So I guess I wouldn't speculate without looking at the data whether that's the case or not. It could be, but I don't think I feel comfortable saying without looking at the data.
Okay. Dr. Nussbaumer, there's some questions I'd like to ask in regards to customer load. What do you understand to be the purpose of identifying on-peak and off-peak periods for TOU rates?
I guess, can you be more specific about that question? I think there are multiple purposes about having on-peak and off-peak periods. I guess, are you looking in terms of peak load shaving, in terms of, yeah, can you be more specific with that?
I'm just asking for your understanding.
My understanding?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess my understanding is, and I'm by no means an expert here, but my understanding here is to reduce consumer consumption during those on-peak periods and encourage consumers to shift their load to off-peak periods.
And in your testimony, you state that you understand the intent behind the company's and staff's proposals to provide stronger price signals to reduce energy usage during the periods of highest system demand. Is that right?
I believe that sounds about right.
Okay. And one conclusion of your analysis is that the proposals from public service and staff may not send the right price signals to incent the behavior outcomes that the TOU rates are intended to incent. Do I have that right?
Yeah, again, if you look at those monthly price signals during June and July, those are periods of highest energy consumption. We see actually for all of the proposed staffed rates, we see potential reductions in the median energy bill. And in my definition of price signal, again, that's a negative price signal. So, a person would potentially see the median customer, assuming no change in behavior, would see a slightly less energy bill. So assuming that we want to reduce consumption during those highest months of energy consumption, I think we would be sending the wrong price signal.
And if we could please go ahead and take this graphic down, that'd be great. So based on that, you just agreed with me that staff's proposals are intended to send strong price signals during the periods of high system demand, right?
Yes, sure.
Okay. Would you agree with me that staff's approach to identifying the periods of highest system demand relied mostly on looking at the system's hourly load, net of renewable generation, and selecting the highest net load hours?
You would have to ask staff that. That's beyond my expertise.
Okay, well, let me see if I can help you out. If we could pull up hearing exhibit 400. This is staff's, Mr. Haglund's testimony. At page 22, please. There on line 6 through 15. Dr. Nussbaumer, this is where staff's approach identified the periods of highest system demand. Do you see that there?
I do, yes.
All right, thank you. If we could take that down. Dr. Nussbaumer, would you agree with me that public service took a similar approach, looking at the highest net load hours, but also the highest gross load hours?
So honestly, I didn't have a time to read that. And I'm not familiar with the company's evaluation as well too. So I wouldn't be able to say. I did kind of catch forecasted, so it looked like those peak periods and the brief period that was up, and I was able to read the first couple of sentences. It looked like they were targeting the peak periods of the forecasted periods. Whether the company did that as well, I'm not sure. I haven't seen that. So I would need time to digest that and read it.
Okay. Were you listening to the hearing yesterday?
I was on and off. I was dealing with kind of a software issue at EOC, so I was on and off the testimony.
Okay. Were you able to hear company witness Knighton testify that they used the gross and net load?
No, sorry, I did not hear that.
Okay. Dr. Nussbaumer, did you provide any testimony or analysis that system net load is an inappropriate metric for identifying periods of high system demand?
I did not provide any such testimony.
Did your testimony refute staff's identification of the 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. hours as capturing the most net load peaks across the forecasts presented in this proceeding?
I did not.
Did you provide any evidence that EOC's preferred on-peak period of 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. reflects periods of highest system demand better than staff's proposed on-peak period?
I did not.
Let's see. Your own analysis looked exclusively at load shapes of residential customers, correct?
That was the data in which I was provided, yes.
Okay. And Dr. Nussbaumer, as you know, PSCo is responsible for the day-to-day, hour-by-hour operations of their electric system. Do you know whether they operate the whole system based on residential demand alone?
I do not know.
Okay. Do you think it would be helpful to know what commercial, industrial, and other customers are doing?
In what context?
On the operation of their electric system, and trying to determine what that is, the load.
I'm
that
sure
we're
it's
talking
probably
about.
pretty important. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to lodge an objection. Ms. Hayden has established what wasn't in Dr. Nussbaumer's testimony, so asking him about that, which is beyond the scope of his testimony.
Ms. Hayden?
Well, we've just completed that line of questioning. I'll move on. In your cross-answer testimony, Dr. Nussbaumer, you included a figure that shows the 2023 load profiles for all customers and IQ customers, right?
That's correct, yes.
Can we please pull up what's been marked as Hearing Exhibit 601? At page 26. Thank you. All right, Dr. Nussbaumer, we'll focus on your testimony here. If we take a look at figure EN-8, this is the summer, right?
That is correct, yes.
And this is the median energy consumption for IQ customers and all customers during the summer months.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And this data is from 2023, right?
That is correct.
And does this figure show net load hours?
Does it show net load hours? I guess I guess in the sense that I'm showing all the hours, right? So all those hours should theoretically include net load hours.
Theoretically?
Yes, it shows net load hours.
All right, the system, okay. This is the system load net of renewable generation. Does it show the net?
Sorry, this is not, sorry. This is not show, I'm not showing any, no, I take that back. I guess net load would include all energy consumption, right? Businesses. I am showing here, I guess, let's go back to what I'm showing here. I am showing the median energy profile for all residential customers. That's a black line. And conversely, I'm showing the median energy, hourly energy consumption for IQ customers.
Okay. Does it show net load specifically?
No.
All right, if we could scroll down a little bit more and look at figure EN9, this also shows the median energy consumption for winter months.
That's correct.
And this is analysis that you completed based on data from the 2023 calendar year?
Same data as before, yes.
Okay, and does this one show net load specifically?
No, does not.
Okay. If we could go ahead and take this down. Thank you. Dr. Nussbaumer, did your analysis incorporate any of the company's data on their forecasted load for the calendar year 2025?
No, I was not provided that data.
Okay. So same for 2028
I was not provided that data.
and 2031?
Yep, not provided that data.
You're aware the company has provided that data?
Oh, they have? I was not aware of that.
Okay. Did you review the testimony of the company that did provide that forecasted load for each of those years?
I can't remember if I saw that or not. I might have, no, I can't remember that. I guess the data that I used, so the data that I used was actual customer usage data, and I felt that was the most appropriate data to use.
Okay. And you are aware, okay. In this proceeding, the company did provide its forecasted load for each of those years. And to confirm,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
To confirm, you didn't use any of the forecasted data that the company provided.
I did not see any hourly consumption. I did not see any hourly consumption data for the forecasted years.
Okay. And within your testimony, are you aware that staff used that forecasted data in their analyses?
So staff had hourly consumption data, forecasted data?
Are you aware of that?
I don't think staff had hourly forecasted data for that year.
The hourly system load data.
I was looking at hourly residential consumption data.
Okay. With that data, did you provide an analysis on the actual peak load of the system?
I did not.
Were you able to evaluate the difference between the gross peak load and net peak load on the system?
That was beyond the scope of my testimony.
Okay. Dr. Nussbaumer, did you undertake any attempt to align the peak demand with what is actually going on with the company's system?
That was beyond the scope of my testimony.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Nussbaumer. I have no further questions.
Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Gilman, questions for Dr. Nussbaumer?
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Question for you. I know in your testimony you look at essentially projections and comparisons of kind of the existing time of use to both public service and staff's options. But I'm curious, since it's been several years with time of use in place already, as a default for most of public services residential customers, you know, given EOC's premise that it is in many ways particularly difficult for IQ customers to shift usage, especially out of the evening hours, I'm curious if you've done any analysis on the actual experience of IQ customers under time of use to date, you know, with anything that might be available to you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's an important question. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to do that. I'm not that data is not under my auspice. If the company was willing to provide that data for us, I would love to conduct that analysis. And I think it would be useful to look at to get a sense of those IQ customers and if they're able to make that shift, and also what their load profiles look like for those that shift and those that are unable to shift.
Okay. But you agree that's data that probably is available. We just need the right person to get this analyzed. We don't need to hypothesize necessarily anymore. We have actual things that have happened, right?
Definitely.
Just one more question for you. On page 25 of your cross answer testimony, you give a figure EN7, which shows the percent difference in medium monthly bills between current schedule RETOU and proposed rates, both those that public services propose as well as staff's 2 options for IQ customers specifically. And in that figure, it shows in all but just a handful. Thank you. It's right at the top. You got it. In all but, for fairly minor instances, disproportionately the results are a negative, or a savings projected in bills under the proposals versus current. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate.
I'm just trying to follow that or track that with EOC's recommendation that we kind of stay the course with the current TOU rates, which, as I understand the data you've presented, would result in higher rates for most IQ customers than any of the proposals that we're looking at in this chart.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and again, Mr. Bennett's probably the best person to ask policy-wise, but I think there's a trade-off here, right? There's the potential for slightly less energy bills, but that comes at a cost. And that cost, I think, for IQ customers is, confusion and mistrust for the utility company. So I think part of the question is like, is it worth that cost, right? Is that trade-off for a slightly lower energy bill? Is it worth the confusion that these customers will go through, the anger that it and sentiment that it might bring up for those customers? Again, we, for those IQ customers, EOC has to kind of bear the brunt of that sentiment. We get a lot of calls and we get a lot of concerns for those customers when rates change. And so it can be a factor for us in dealing with that type of thing. So, part of it is us trying to weigh that cost benefit of, is that slight decrease, is it worth kind of the I guess the process we would have to go through to reassure our IQ customers.
Okay, those are my only questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Goman. Commissioner Plant.
I have no questions. Thanks.
Just 2 questions. A couple questions maybe. Are you aware that Xcel Energy is proposing to spend over $20 billion in capital costs in Colorado over the next 5 years or so?
No, I am now, though.
Does that change how you think about the inconvenience to EOC and those customers as we collectively try to perhaps manage down those costs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I personally, and I'll speak, personally, I kind of I veer towards the viewpoint of Mr. Lucas, and I really think this can be solved on, or at least helped out on a technology side. So, again, going back to Harding and Sexton of 2017, and their research really shows that the things that help price elasticities in these TOU rates is technology and automation of that technology. So for me, thinking, I understand there's a huge investment, and I think, part of the ways to ensure shifting of load, or, it's not always, people don't always shift necessarily with these TOU rates, but sometimes there's actually just conservation during those periods. But, I think the most effective ways to do that are things like programmable smart thermostats with default rates, right? Again, the research shows that even people with programmable thermostats, if the default rates are not, or the default behavior is not already set, then they don't see that same shifting of behavior. But I also see long-term type of solutions of energy efficiency upgrades. I think those are really beneficial in terms of load reduction. Because again, I think these short-term price demand elasticities are really small. And I think the longer-term demand elasticities are greater.
Appreciate that. Last question. Assume for purposes of this question, we ordered an evening peak demand period lasting somewhere between 3 and 5 hours, somewhere during the time period from 5 to 10 p.m. across both summer and winter, across all customers, with a peak off-peak ratio similar to the one that currently exists, with revenue neutrality for the company on average, and implementation after the summer of 2025. Any advice about how we might structure an order in this case to address the concerns you raised on cross-answer or sir rebuttal testimony?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I definitely think it's worth digging into. I don't think I would be offhand without looking into the data and doing the analysis. I don't think I would be able to provide any reasonable sort of suggestions, but I think it's worth suggesting that we take a look at it and do the analysis and sit down and work through what are the price signals and what are the load shapes for those people that see those price signals. So I definitely think it's worth looking down and investigating that.
Ms. Stockmeyer, any redirect?
Thank you, Chair. Would it at all be possible to take a brief bathroom break before we do redirect?
Yeah, just realized we're probably 5 minutes away from ending this hearing. All right, we'll come back at 11 a.m. 11 a.m.
Thank you, Chair.
Ms. Stockmeyer, any redirect?
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Nussbaumer, sorry. uh, uh, Staff's counsel had a discussion with you about the kind of analysis you did and didn't do. At a very high level, can you summarize what you did in your analysis and why?
Yeah, definitely. Our analysis, so we started our analysis because we saw that a bill impact study for IQ customers had not been done. So that's kind of what kicked off. We wanted to understand what was the impact for our IQ customers. So at a high level, we were able to get 2023 hourly energy consumption data for residential Excel customers that had AMI meters. We use this data to look at the cost of bills for customers if they were on the current rate versus all the proposed rates. And then we looked at differences in those bills on a monthly basis for those customers. So whether they would see an increase in their bill or whether they would see a decrease in their bill. For those that saw a positive price signal, we looked at what the median energy consumption was like for those customers versus those that saw a negative price signal. And we did this both in the summertime and the wintertime.
Okay. And so if we could turn to hearing exhibit 602, please, at figure EN2 on page 10. This was an analysis presented in your SIR rebuttal. What was surprising about your findings here?
Yeah, so let me set the context here. So here we are looking at individuals that see a negative price signal. So what that means is their bills.
Mr. Manchell, did you?
I did. I objected. I don't understand the basis. There's no foundation here that this is something that was brought up during cross. My objection is that this is outside of cross and inappropriate for redirect.
Ms. Stockmeyer.
There was questioning from staff about the analysis that was done and not done. There was questioning from the company about price signal. I think using this as an example to explain what EOC did and what it found would be helpful to clarify the record here.
I think I mean, they didn't really ask what he did. They asked what he didn't do. I mean, this is pretty far afield. Especially like right, well, geez. Mr. Foreman, Mr. Asera, are you there? I think this is too far afield for me.
I can move on, Chair.
All right, that'd be appreciated.
Commissioner Gilman had some questions too about what kind of analysis EOC was able to do, did do, can do on income qualified specific customers. So I'd like to just turn back, and also I believe Ms. Hayden also pointed you here, figures EN8 and EN9 in your hearing exhibit 601. This is your cross answer. These are figures, page 26, apologies. Dr. Nussbaumer, can you explain what analysis you did here?
Yeah, definitely. So again, I wish I had more time to kind of dig into this more. We were kind of, with the rates constantly in flux, it was hard to keep up. And I guess, given more time, I think it would be useful to look at the impact for IQ customers. But that being said, the analysis that I was able to conduct I wanted to compare the energy consumption both over the summer and the winter. So this first graph, EN8, we're seeing the load profiles, the median load profiles for customers over the summertime. The black line represents all the customers, so that was all the customers included within that data set, whereas the I don't know, is it turquoise or greenish line represents those of IQ customers. And we identified those IQ customers using census data.
And why did you need to use census data?
We weren't provided information in the data provided by the company. We weren't provided information on which customers were IQ customers in that data set. So we had to infer that from the census data.
And if we could just zoom out a little bit so you can see both of the graphs on the same page, please. Did this analysis inform EOC's concerns with TOU race at all?
Yeah, it does. I think pretty obvious from this graph, and I think I don't know if I can bring this up, but we've shown in other sort of testimony is that IQ customers tend to use less energy than regular customers, and it's a statistically significant difference. So here you can see that the median energy consumption for IQ customers is below that of all customers for both summer and winter time. I think this is important to note in the sense that IQ customers are already using lower energy than the median IQ customer is already using lower energy than the median overall customers. And this is a good indication that IQ customers will have a harder time shifting their profile, right? They're already reduced their energy consumption. And so that means that shifting that type of reduced energy consumption is more difficult.
Okay. And then lastly, let's go ahead and turn to hearing exhibit 602, please. The bottom of page 14, top of page 15. This is in your rebuttal. What is, in terms of the analysis here for income qualified customers, what were you able to find here?
Yeah, so for this, again, this graph, we are looking at the median monthly bill between the current scheduled TOU and the proposed rates for income qualified customers. And again, so each of those months, you can see bars that go up above zero. Those are positive price signals. So they're seeing increases in their monthly bills. And the bars that go below zero, they're seeing decreases in the monthly bill. And the bars are colored by the different options. So we're looking at the difference. The baseline is the current TOU rate, and then we're comparing against each of those proposed rates. And I think most starkly, you can see that with the rebuttal TOU, the customers will see higher, the median customer, income qualified customer, will see higher bills October through May, and see a reduction in bills June through September. And I think this highlights kind of the opposite approach that these rates are supposed to impart, right? So if these rates are supposed to impart a price signal, we want people to reduce their energy consumption in the months of highest energy demand, and that includes June, July, and August. And I think this is showing the opposite of that for IQ customers. And I think it just highlights that we should really dig into this, and we should really understand the impacts of these TOU rates on residential customers, right? I think we can talk about ratios of on-peak to off-peak, but I think it's worthwhile that we really look at this data and make sure that we're giving the correct signals that we want to give.
And to staff's point, the median IQ customer here would potentially see a bill decrease each month. So can you just clarify again why EOC isn't supportive of a 5 to 10 or a 4 to 9 5-hour on-peak period if some customers might be able to benefit from this?
Yeah, again, when going back to the purpose of this hearing, like, I came in with the lens of looking at the effectiveness of shifting load for these customers and for IQ customers, and that was really kind of what the lens of this analysis was looking at. So in regards to sending the correct price signal, the purpose of this testimony in regards to sending the correct price signal, I wouldn't be able to recommend these rates, because the analysis that I did shows that during the months of peak energy consumption, we're sending a negative price signal, and in some cases during the wintertime months, we're sending positive price signals. And then also going back, showing that IQ customers have a hard time shifting their energy consumption. I just that within that lens, I'm not able to recommend those rates.
And you also had a conversation with Commissioner Gilman about the trade-offs. In your mind, is the trade-off of a small, what's on the other side of a small bill reduction? What's the potential cost here?
Yeah, the potential cost is, confusion to the customer, and also angst and mistrust, really. And Mr. Bennett has testified that, speaking to the IQ community, like we've seen, there's already a layer of mistrust to the utility company. And I think to change a rate and then quickly change it again, I think that I don't think that has anything to ameliorate that mistrust.
And lastly, you had a brief discussion with Commissioner Blank about your thoughts that some other programs, for example, participation in energy efficiency programs or technology applications, that those could be really helpful in shifting load as well. Is customer trust and satisfaction important in getting enrollment in those kinds of programs?
100%. I think customer trust is really important in getting people's buy-in, and buy-in to those programs, as well as buy-in to downloading the app or using a customer portal. I think it's really important to have that customer trust and to have that customer buy-in.
Thank you, Dr. Nussbaumer. I have no further questions.
Thanks.
Thank you, Doctor. You may be excused. Appreciate it. Any final matters before we close the record, Mr. Wittershine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to quickly confirm with the company that they have no objections to UCA's hearing exhibits that were introduced yesterday.
No objections.
Thank you. And also confirm with the commission that hearing exhibits 301 through 307 have been admitted into evidence.
That's my understanding, Ms. Federico.
I believe so as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other final matters? I'll just want to thank everybody for an informative, incisive conversation over the last day and a half that did not go as long as scheduled. So I greatly appreciate the discipline and value, and I learned a ton. And Commissioner Gilman, final thoughts?
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Plant.
I appreciate it as well. Thanks a lot.
So unless any statement of positions, I would say due January 31st, 2025. I think that's consistent with the schedule. Does anybody have concerns with that? I see everyone shaking their heads no, so do January 31st. Any other final thoughts? For that, again, my thanks to everybody. The record is now closed, and we'll look for the statements of position. Thanks all.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you. Thank you.